Hello there, IELTS students. In this video, we are going to look at pronunciation, IELTS pronunciation practice. We're going to look at different ways that we can improve your pronunciation. And these are all small, actionable, valuable tips that you can start to incorporate into your IELTS preparation to improve your pronunciation. Let's jump straight into it. So, part one of the IELTS speaking test is where you're going to get the relatively easy questions. This part of the test is to make you at ease, to relax you, and this way, if you're relaxed, you're going to give a truer reflection of your abilities. Whereas if you're nervous, then you're not going to give the true reflection of your abilities. The examiners know this, hence we have part one to make you feel more relaxed. And the tip here is that because we know the kind of questions you are going to get, they're going to be like, how long have you lived in Australia? Do you like living in England? Are you a student or are you working? These kind of just general small talk style questions. Because we kind of know the area, we know the topic is going to be yourself, there's no reason why you cannot perfect these questions. So, for example, the examiner might say, tell me about your hometown or tell me where you're from. There's nothing stopping you from preparing and perfecting your answer and sort of like almost guessing or just doing the answers and trying to prepare in advance any of the tricky pronunciation topics or words that might crop up or that might appear when you give your typical answers. So for number one, prepare in advance. How do we do this? Well, we sit down with a native speaker, they ask you these kind of questions and they make notes if you're making any mistakes, okay? Get feedback is the fastest way to improve. Number two, to improve your pronunciation, we can speak slower. What this does is it gives the examiner or the listener more time to understand you, so it makes you sound clearer. And if they've got more time to understand you, they're more likely to comprehend what you're saying, which makes you sound better, it makes your communication better. But use this with caution, okay? You don't want to be like, if the examiner asks you, hey, what's your name? You don't want to be saying, my name is Ben, okay? But you do need to slow it down. Oh, I would recommend trying to slow it down a little bit just to improve comprehension. That's all. Once again, experiment, get some feedback, and yeah, just you decide after doing these little mini tests, so to speak. Number three is probably my favorite, but this was fascinating the first time I learned about this. But if you want to improve your pronunciation in a target language, in this case English, you need to know the intonation patterns, the patterns of that specific language. I think it's actually universal, this specific pattern I'm going to share now. But in English, when we are unsure about a certain thing or some question, or a question, for example, we go up at the end of the sentence. So, is it over there? You see, we go up at the end. And we can also do this in an answer. If we're not so sure about our own answer, we can say, yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it doesn't sound so certain. Whereas if we go down at the end of the sentence, then we are conveying certainty. So, is it over there? Yes, it's definitely over there. Or yes, it's over there. So we can adopt these speaking patterns. We can start incorporating them into our own communication to enhance, to improve, and to make it more emphatic what we are saying. Okay, once again, it's probably best just to make a note of this and then try and adopt it the next time you're speaking English. And it's quite fun. You can play with it the first times, get some feedback, probably get some weird looks as well. All right, next one. So, where is it? Yes, it's called connected speech. You need to be aware of connected speech. This is also going to improve your listening skills. Okay, so what I'm saying is that when we speak English, some of the sounds of the words can get pushed together. And this happens when the first word ends with a consonant sound and the second word begins with a vowel sound. I can say, for example, he is an environmentalist. There, I said it separatedly. Okay, I said it in a separated fashion, which is not natural. It's much more natural to say he's an environmentalist. And when you say it like that, it's connected. And for a newcomer to the English language, it just sounds like he's it sounds all pushed together. So if you want to learn more about this, and I strongly recommend you do, because it's like the mechanics of the language, part of the mechanics, have a look at the link. I've put it in the comments, and there's some MP3s there where you can listen to it. You can listen to it being explained by more qualified people and in greater detail as well. I'm just trying to introduce you to the topic here. Next one. To improve your pronunciation, you need to know the mistakes that are common from speakers of your own language, from speakers of your own language. For example, Eastern Europeans, Slavic language speakers, often have challenges with the articles, with the and an and a. And this is reflected very commonly when you can hear a relatively new speaker of English who comes from Eastern Europe. Likewise, in Asia, it's quite common for new speakers of English to have challenges with the L sound. With Spaniards, they're famously, they have a challenge with the H, they pronounce it and with Italians, they don't speak English, they sing it. But it's very melodic. So you need to get familiar with not familiar, but you need to know the common errors that your native language group often makes with English. And you can find that online as well. It's relatively quick, relatively simple. So the next one, this is probably my favorite actually, because it's the fastest, it's the most economical, and it's probably the most natural. And also you can do it as much as you want, and you're not going to break the bank in the process. But what I'm talking about is mimicking. So you find some authentic native speaker material, maybe some BBC podcasts, maybe an IELTS podcast, or even, I don't know, New York podcasts, whatever, New York Times podcast. And what you can do is you copy the fragments of the sound, the fragments of the speech. So you listen to it for like 10 seconds and then try and repeat it word for word, sound for sound. And even you could go as far as memorizing it. But what this will do is you'll get a good, solid introduction to the rhythm of the language, the sounds of the language. You'll probably improve your vocabulary at the same time. Really cost-effective and effective way of learning the language. Now, as a bonus tip, when you're doing this, pay attention to chunks or collocations. By chunks, this is like a way of learning the language, or one tool you can use to learn the language. And what we do is we listen for collocations, and then we try and adopt them into our own speaking. So one chunk of language might be time of my life. Okay, it's very common for those 4 words to be said together. So I had the time of my life. He had the time of his life. Yeah, but if we just learn it one chunk, time of my life, then it sounds very natural when we use these chunks of words in our own speech, because the listener is half expecting it. Okay, you start off with time of, and they've already kind of guessed the next part. I'll give you another example. You could say, I wouldn't if I were you. Yeah, it's like advice. I wouldn't do that if I were you, or I wouldn't if I were you. But you can just learn that whole chunk, and you can give that in certain, obviously in appropriate situations, and because you learn it all together in one certain chunk, and you pronounce it all together, and you learn and you speak it, you say it all at the same time, it makes you sound like a native speaker. I wouldn't if I were you. Yeah, and the more times you use it, the more confident you get, the more familiar you become with it. Another one would be, where is it? It's definitely worth the effort. Yeah, it's definitely worth the effort. So by just learning like fragments and chunks like that, not only do we say them a little bit faster, which makes us sound a little bit more like native speakers, but we're also just improving our pronunciation, because we're going to be more comfortable once we've mastered it. So we're just saying it, and it just flows then. So keep an eye out, or an ear out, to pay attention. And when you hear certain chunks like that, write them down and try and incorporate them into your own lexical resource. Final tips, 3 more, and then we're done. So next one, singing. I won't go into this into too much detail, but if we're singing, it's much more enjoyable than listening to an IELTS speaking test or an IELTS listening test. And because it's more enjoyable, you're more likely to do it more. And yeah, you can improve your vocabulary, you can improve your pronunciation, you're mimicking them, but it's just a little bit more enjoyable and lighthearted. Next one, test your skills on the phone. Okay, this is more for the people who just really want to push the level and really want to get an idea. Start talking to somebody on the phone. When you're on the phone, there's no visual clues. You can't use your hands. You can't point to things. You can't use your face as expressions. So it's like the purest of the pure of audio communication. And this you'll get a really good idea of how good your speaking ability is after conversing on the phone, especially if it's with somebody who's not familiar with your voice or how you speak. So this is really good, because the examiner has probably never ever spoke to you before, unless you're one of those students who's done like 10, 20 exams. But so the examiner is not going to be familiar with your speech patterns, your accent. So this is a good simulation, bringing people up on the phone who you've never spoken to before, try and get directions, information, details, and yeah, a really solid testing test. Okay, next one, final one. Increase your exposure to the English language. By this, I mean start listening to BBC Podcast, IELTS Podcast, IELTS Podcast. Start listening to some audiobooks as well. The audiobooks are fantastic. I'm enjoying a really good one at the moment. It's called Shoe Dog, and I think there's a link in the comments to where you can get a free trial. I think you could even possibly download it for free as well. But the good thing is about audiobooks is that there's maybe 6-7 hours of material, and you get really engrossed in the material as well. So it's not like a podcast where you listen to 20, 30, 40 minutes, you stop. The audiobook, it kind of pulls you in. If it's a good story, it pulls you in, and you stay there for the duration. You stay there for the good 7 hours, 6 hours, however long the audiobook is. Personally, I prefer biographies, but have a look at the link and hopefully you'll find some good audiobooks for you and you'll start a good 6-7 hour listening session. And while you're listening, you can incorporate the mimicking, you can incorporate the checking for chunking or for chunks of the language, collocations, and why not also get the book and read the book at the same time, just to really immerse yourself in that topic. Okay, so my name is Ben Worthington. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be doing more of these tutorials, and if you've got any questions, you can leave a comment below. Go to